Hi, Pramod. Welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here, Varma.
Pramod, I got to know that you were actually born in Kilimanur in Kerala. Coincidentally, I am also from Kerala, but grew up in Thrissur. However, not a lot of things are uh, in the public sphere about your, education and childhood. We all know that you started off as a computer scientist, had a startup based out of Boston. But tell me a little bit about, growing up in Thrissur and also your education all the way up to PhD.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, when you are old enough, nobody cares about what happened 50 years ago. But yeah, I can speak about it. I grew up in a town called Thrissur. That's in the middle of Kerala. And it was a beautiful place. And my parents had migrated there. So they were not born there, but they came there to work. Mom was a school teacher, father was a small businessman because they're all royal families. So they just had to fend for themselves after the royalty was stripped off, and the Land Reformation Act, and so the much of the generation, my parents' generation, had to reinvent themselves as a commoner and find their way. But my mom loved teaching, and she inherits great language skills. She's used to be a writer, and she just thoroughly enjoyed all that effort. And myself, my brother, we grew up in the same town. We went to a school that is super tiny. Uh, that school seemed to have resurrected themselves, recently. Seemed to be in a good spot. But when we were growing up, that was towards the end of that school. It was nearly about 100-year-old school. So just breaking apart, there was nothing. My mom taught in the same school in the girls section. So, we ended up going there. It was like a walking distance from our house. Uh, those days, no traffic. This is in early 70s. So you can imagine India was, much different. And, it was fun days, lot of fun, a lot of village-like fun, very rural-like fun. And we were least exposed, no nothing, no connection, phone connections, no internet, no exposure to anything, no good schools. We didn't go to good. I mean, either as children, if you're not exposed to your networks, uh, good networks or good networks that discuss different set of topics, different set of aspirations, then you tend to have, you tend to be muted, which is what happened to a lot of us. Our friends were, half of our classmates didn't even have, we're all first generation, or even more than half of my classmates, first generation ever going to school. Uh, at least 10-20% of my classmates didn't even have proper addresses. I mean, they were very, very poor. Uh, and most of my classmates ended up just in the town doing nothing. Just pretty much they either did some labor work or became some drivers and so on. I mean, just that's what they could get at that time. Right? I think it was hard to get through, and it was not even an English medium school. So I learned much of my until 17 or so, 17, 18, I couldn't even speak a sentence of English. It was very, very different. So it's very different exposure. I think there's when you realize that children who were born in a family where your networks are very different level of equilibrium. They tend to have such an advance early shot at uh, the right places, right topics, right dinner table conversations, right exposure. I had never heard about IITs, didn't even hear. I heard IIT when I went to post graduation. Literally when I went out of town, I heard about it. I heard something like IIT. So it was very weird. But nevertheless, great fun, good place, and humbling, stages of life. And very, very middle class, standard middle class value systems and so on. So good fun. And then, but I was good at maths and I always wanted to pursue maths, physics. So I continued that into my undergrad. Math as a origin. I didn't go in the engineering route. But then, of course, when I was about to go to graduate school, it was about 87 or so, 86, 87. By then things have started changing, right? So, every decade we could see in India had mid 80s, we had, all the early computers. I had some of my friends bringing early programming, gaming machines. And so we had a little bit of those exposure early. My first cousin was already doing his PhD in computer science. He was teaching. So, a little bit of that exposure. Then, of course, the TV revolution that happened mid 80s, Rajiv Gandhi time, Prime Minister. A lot of sudden exposure to the world, right? That happened. So by 86, we were a lot more starting to be ambitious, a lot more than hanging around in the town, which is very common in Kerala, by the way. Very highly educated people, but they just hang around. And they're quite happy and nothing wrong, right, about it. It's just not many of them seem to, have very large, or sort of audacious ambitions or anything, which is okay. But I think we were hungry, myself, my brother, we were very hungry about growth, wanting to break out of the paradigm and wanting to explore newer pastures and newer opportunities. So I didn't want to do my graduate school in Kerala. So I went out to do Hyderabad, applied mathematics masters. That was a very different exposure. It's unbelievable. I just showed up in Hyderabad literally with 500 rupees in my pocket. I couldn't speak Hindi. I couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Telugu at all, obviously. But just showed up. And my parents didn't even come. I mean, I was just alone. I just picked the train and took the train and went there to get admission. It was a national entrance. So I wrote the entrance in Kerala. It was a national entrance. It was a central university. But post admission, I had to show up there, and so we went there and didn't know anyone. Just managed to. So you sort of put yourself in a very challenging situations to break out of your comfort zone, and then I learned Telugu. I could read and write Telugu in a year. I could, I was starting to learn broken Hindi, slightly better English. All that thing happened during my master's degree or graduate program. And then I wrote my national entrance for my MTech computer science. Went to Delhi and completed my PhD, and then came back to Bangalore to join Infosys late '93. Because I wanted to be close. I wanted to be closer. I never didn't connect much with Delhi. Although I lived there for 4 years, maybe my parents were back home, and so I thought it made sense to be in South. By the time I finished, it was 93. 92, India opened up our economy. Computer science is a big topic. So graduating PhD in computer science, MTech was a perfect timing because the IT sector was growing, early growth in 90s. So lucky serendipity, end up in Infosys and end up working with Nandan in early 94, 95 and their IPO and, all the, when you plan nothing, you tend to luck seem to favor.
Yeah. And I think, back in the day, maybe Delhi would have also seemed so much farther from a place like Kerala, right? Because you would have probably had to take that
Train,
arduous
second class train. Yeah, 52 hours train journey. Yeah, it was far.
Yeah, because I remember like my
Flying was not affordable.
yeah, absolutely not. I mean, I remember my dad moved to Calcutta in 93 and I did my like LKG, UKG, first, second, third there. And yeah, like thinking about going to Kerala was a task and the trains would
Yeah.
never run
Serious
on time.
planning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like you said about your childhood in Thrissur, India was very different. And
Very different.
funny enough, life came a full circle, and you were part of one of the transformation that India underwent, which we will dive deep into. But before that, after PhD, you had a brief stint in the US, and you
Yeah.
founded Yantra Corporation in Boston.
So yeah, just talk about it. So I joined Infosys. I was there for a couple of years, but then Infosys funded. Infosys had a IP in the supply chain, early
Hmm.
IP in the supply chain world, in the warehousing, transportation, and their customers are all in the US. I mean, they were US Europe customers. Most of the customers even today actually are from global north. But our CEO then, Devdutt Yelurkar, who was heading worldwide sales for Infosys, thought he would want to carve out that IP, intellectual property, as an independent product company. So he asked Infosys for support to transfer the IP to Yantra Corporation and create that company, found that company, and 10 of us were part of the founding team. But Devdutt, as a CEO, led much of that effort in Boston, near Boston. And then we got transferred. Some of us got transferred from here to be part of that journey. But it made sense for us to be, if you are a product company in mid 90s, 95, literally, we started the company. It made no sense. It was difficult to be in India, but selling to the global north. So we had to be in the US selling to the US customers, and we did exceptionally well in that product company. So we 95 to 2005, Yantra decade raised a couple of rounds of funding, 3 rounds actually, and then successful exit in terms of we got acquired in 2005. But by 2003, I had moved back because we started our engineering, expanded our engineering, product engineering back to Bangalore. It's also because some of us wanted to be back home. 2003 was good time. My daughters were going to school, so it was perfect time to come back. And our parents were here and siblings were, it made sense for us to be back. It was a good move. Thinking back, early 2000, moving back to India was sort of good timing again. You don't plan for it, but our hearts were here. And, we had great experience in the US. It's an amazing professional experience running a product company in the US. It's just brilliant. Raising funds, dealing with venture capitalists, dealing with customers. But 2003, it was a good time for our family to come back. And so we started our engineering. And 2005, we got acquired, and I was continued to be the global chief architect and the tech head for the acquired company. It was an Ohio-based company. And we continue to have offices in Bangalore, Boston. We also had West Coast. We had another acquisition after that. One more acquisition. We did acquired another company in West Coast. And we consolidated all that thing between those rounds. And we literally dominated the retail supply chain world. We literally coined the term multi-channel commerce, and that became a big thing. Gartner and all this, analysts would have a separate category. We created a new category called multi-channel commerce, where traditional supply chain, I mean, the ordering used to be either you order completely on a website, which is new. Early 2000 website ordering was just coming up. It was Amazon and all had done it. So people were traditional retailers like Target, Best Buy, Macy's, JCPenney. They were all coming up with their website strategy. They already had a store. They already had large stores. So the store was there. And some of them had catalogs like Lands' End had catalog where you put the old style US catalog. You call in, right? A number, 1-800 number. And you say product number 33 in that catalog, and then they will ship it to you. And card on file. I mean, you pay through card. But there was no coherent mechanism for that to unify. So we offered that brilliant layer on top of their traditional, what's called a retail ERP systems, where we gave dynamic cross-channel, multi-channel inventory management, multi-channel order management, multi-channel, what do you call available to promise algorithms. We offered order routing, all that thing to figure out how. We also provided them a mechanism to go beyond their internal supply chain or warehouses to third-party partners, which is very big. So we acquired Home Depot, we had Best Buy, we had JCPenney, Walmart, Macy's, you name a retailer, Target, we own them. It was brilliant. And 2009, I quit all that thing and joined, sort of to build the nation.
Yeah, it was also probably the golden age of the malls and people wanting to
Yeah,
go out to
yeah,
brick and mortar stores. And to your point about moving back to India when your kids are the right age, I've heard people say that, right before they join school, maybe it's a good time to move back, because once they join school and get a taste or make friends, then it's even harder to plant your family back to India. So I guess 2003
yeah.
worked out perfectly.
And again, I think it's just finally priorities and personal preferences. Nothing right, wrong about any of this.
Yeah.
So some people, a lot of my friends stayed back, and they have lovely families back in the US. Some of us moved back, and because our parents were getting older, and it's our own personal preferences and priorities
Yeah. Yeah.
played out. But it worked out really well for me personally, because India was going through a massive, one decade later, 92 we opened up our economy, took a decade, then the second decade was starting to grow, and now third decade and so on, right? And we are in the fourth decade nearly now,
Hmm.
starting our post economic shift. So we are growing really well, and that was perfect timing for us to, even professionally it worked very well for me.
Mm. Excellent. So you moved back to India and you continued being, having a successful career, and then came 2009.
Yeah.
What was the dramatic shift? Like, how did you get into this process? I know you had a relationship with Nandan even before that, but walk me through that process on how you came on board.
Yeah, so 2009, no, we were, I continued to be leading the technology globally for uh, that large company which we were part of, called Sterling Commerce. It used to be, Dublin, Ohio based headquartered company, but global. And we had global customers, and I would travel back and forth, and we continue to grow. We had, I think, probably billion plus valuation, quite nice, stable, high, good revenues, and roughly about 700 million revenue. So it was pretty good thing going on. But I think in one sense, if you look at the Yantra career of 10 years and then subsequently Sterling Commerce, it was like our own baby, our products growing up, and and it's been there so 15 years or so, right? I was there 15 years, and it I wasn't looking out for anything, frankly. I wasn't looking out for any change because we loved that product was doing well, and we had brilliant engineering, good leadership. So but on a fine day, early June, I read the newspaper in 2009 that Nandan Nilekani has been picked as to lead the UID project. It was called a UID project then, and there was no name called Adhaar, but UID project. And I think to myself that, wow, this is fantastic. The government reaching out to somebody like Nandan to lead a national project, digital project. And I had read about his Imagining India. He had covered the topic of why identity is key, and some of the banking, financial inclusion aspects, and so on. So it sort of, it was very quick in my mind, thinking that it would be wonderful if I could reach out to him and see whether we could sort of join the mission. And I spoke to my wife, and she's been my supporter throughout. I know her from uh, high school, early college days. So I had a good chat with her. She's been holding the pillar at home through our startups, through our shifts, but supporting the two girls growing up while I was super busy. I continue to be busy, by the way. Very busy, and she held the fort at home, making sure it is truly a home. And I spoke to her and asked her, and she's also from Kerala, and I asked her if would it, what if I quit and just join this? And she was shocked a little bit, and because she thought it was a government project. Why would you want to be a part of the government project? What does it mean? But she was supportive and hugely supportive of, because it said, okay, worst case, 1 year later, the project will not work, and 1 or 2 years later, at worst case, you can always go back to the industry. And we were confident that, if other UID project didn't take off, I'm in Bangalore, and tech was booming, and there's enough opportunity there. Smartphones had already arrived, and all kinds of new tech startups are coming. I would have walked into another place and continued my professional career. So it was not too much of a risk, frankly, to take that. And my wife supported and knew my third phase is coming. My education phase was over, my professional phase was over, the third phase is hitting us. And she supported that. And then I contacted Nandan. I was completely out of touch with him. But I contacted through another friend, got his email, wrote to him, and said, I want to come and meet you. And I went and met him. He was kind enough to acknowledge that he does remember me from our early project in 94, but I don't think he remembered. Maybe he was just kind enough to say he does remember. But he has exceptionally good memory, by the way. So I would be surprised that. And then I quit the job in literally a week. So I went back to our company, our leadership. We have been together for 15 years, right? So leadership was so proud, and they were so supportive of me doing this. It's because I wasn't quitting because I'm bored. I'm not quitting because I'm going to a competitor. I'm quitting to build the nation, and they were so proud. They were all truly, they all supported. They're saying that, oh, we are so proud of you doing this, and whatever it takes for you to smoothly move. Take your time, whatever it wants. So I said, it's only appropriate that I do this fast enough and not linger around. And then by July, I was out of the company, and I was volunteering for Aadhaar. And then there was no going back.
Yeah. I heard you mention in an interview that when Nandan pitched to the Prime Minister at the time, he said 600 million or so in the first 4 years, and everyone was just flabbergasted by the number. Like, how are we going to achieve this target? And just to take back, like, go back to what your wife said about you moving to a government project. Uh, Moving from a private sector to a government project, I mean, I'm sure things would have worked a lot differently, right? I mean, when you're in a private sector, you're looking at product market fit, how the economics is going to work out, is it sellable, is it scalable, etc. And this is completely different. This is mostly for public good. And there is this notion in India, and I'm sure it's the same across the world, that government projects take time. Funds take time to get allotted. There's going to be a lot of friction, red tapeism, etc. How did you navigate through such a process, and was it a seamless, frictionless thing, that you were told, do whatever is the best that needs to be done and go do your job?
Yeah, excellent question. It was, I think, Nandan being there um, made the difference between, it's being a pure government job versus a government project, which would typically mean they would assemble sort of a largish bureaucratic structure, and they would have they would probably pick what's called as strategy consulting firm, some sort of a project management consulting firm like EY. EY in fact was our subsequent our PMC, or Deloitte, or McKinsey or BCG, depending on the kind of project. You will pick one, and then you ask them to think about this project and come up with the full project plan, or how to do this project. And they would create the strategy document, they would create all the stuff, they would think through that, and then you do big tender to actually build it. First you do a tender to think about it, then you do a tender to build it, and then you try rolling it out with officers, people, and all that thing, right? Very traditional it would have gone. But I think Nandan brought, with a lot of us being, we were thinking product market fit. We were thinking demand side. We were thinking, why would this people stand in line? How can this be, this not become a supply centric, cost heavy project where you upfront spend a lot of money for setting up offices, data centers, procurement computers, procuring vendor, writing code. Who knows whether eventually it will get launched? It can get launched, but it will get launched. Nobody thinks about demand in the government that easily. A lot of them are trained to do supply side activities because they have been asked to do a project. They will do a project. Output and outcome and all is, how much, we can think about it later, right? So the cost would be very upfront heavy. That means you spend a lot of money upfront, but we flipped all that thing in this. So Nandan brought, so Bangalore and Delhi had to come together in one sense. And there was cultural shock, of course, tremendous cultural shock. But I think, we had Ram Sevak Sarma as this, CEO, then Ganga and Ashok Pal Singh, and some of them are already, they were showcased in that recent documentary movie that came out, 12-digit masterpiece, it was called, I think, yeah. And they were very kind, and they were very supportive and understanding of us in one sense. And we looked like alien particles, in the system. We wouldn't understand the bureaucratic rigor. We wouldn't understand what it means to do a couple of $1 billion project going through parliament approvals and paperwork and cabinet notes. And what does it mean, the rigor of doing? We don't fully get it. We don't understand it. We were new. We were techies. Our behaviors were techie in the sense that small things, right? We were calling sir everybody. It might seem funny, but there is a DNA of a system. Bureaucratic system is very different from a DNA of a Bangalore tech world. But I think both sides had to learn. Both sides had to appreciate why the counterparty is doing in a particular way. And people who appreciated and opened up their mind to learn survived in the system very, very well. So people like us were very, very open to learning and appreciating why the systems like this are complex and why government projects are notoriously complex and difficult to execute, and why the officers have to keep, dot the I, cross the T, parliament questions, answer everything, RTI, right to information. They have to deal with all that thing. It is public taxpayers' money. And so that rigor, we had to appreciate it, but they were also very kind. The leadership in Delhi was very kind to accommodate us and support and they realized that we do bring some good value to the table, and it is better to use them in the right way. And so I think we had a very good, what Indians call jugalbandi, the good harmony, jazz play between Delhi and Bangalore happening. And we brought, the project was brilliantly executed by a tiny team, 150 people or so, total organization with $1 per person. By the time we reached 1 billion people, we were $1 per person. uh, every cost, and we moved much of the cost to outcome-driven payments, so that we don't pay upfront. So we would have paid only on successful, Aadhaar generation successful, deduplication successful. So we OPEXified a lot more than CapEx heavy, investment heavy, which is what traditional government projects are. Uh, and we got to 207, sort of a million people in less than a year. Very slow takeoff. And then by then we were doing 1 million to 1.5 million every day. And then we got to 1 billion in 7 years.
Yeah.
So, and then promised 600 million to, because I think for him, he wanted to be, he realized that he had a 4-year runway before the next election comes, or 5-year, but first year is about design, launch. We can't do anything for the first year because a lot of paperwork, a lot of design, a lot of putting the organization together to actually launch. So we could only launch in the second year, and at best we have 4 years. Ideally 3.5 years, because the last 6 months again go back to election mode. So it's very he was very calculative, but he said unless we have half the country, it can be unplugged. So if you are at 100, 200 million, it would still seem like 10% of the country covered. So it's nothing. 10, 15, 20% is covered. They could still unplug. So how do you bring irreversibility was very key in the system. So he had promised 600 million, and he did 600 million before he exited. He exited in 2014 March, when the election was announced, because he was a cabinet minister rank. He was invited by the government. The government ended before the election, so he also had to end. By then, we had already 600 million people. So it's just, when you put together an audacious, out of reach goal, I think teams tend to leave their egos outside and find a way to meet it. But if it is a comfortable goal, then you tend to use all your non-muscles and your ego, your office, your way of doing. Here, none of that worked because this number was crazy. It didn't even make any sense to any. How are we going to reach 600 million? No system has ever reached 600 million in even in decade. Facebook took more than that. WhatsApp took more than that. So it was just crazy number to get to that. But it actually meant the entire team had to reimagine how to do it.
Yeah. I remember Elon Musk saying once that, if you give yourself 30 minutes to do it, you get it done in 30 minutes. If you give yourself 30 days to do it, you get it done in 30 days. So, yeah.
And I think it also meant that we could design much lighter weight, outcome driven models. That was ecosystem driven model. To get to 1 billion, we can't have 1,500, 2,000 people organization, because recruiting 2,000 would have taken 2 years. By the time we get to it, and offices. So we never built up any offices other than some 6 regional offices. We never had actual centers. We didn't have people. We said, though if you don't have people, and if you have to reach 600 million, the only way you can reach is through ecosystem partnerships. So we had to shamelessly go out of it, which is very unusual for a government institution to reach out to other departments, because ideally you have been given a task, you do your task. Collaboration is not natural cup of tea there, right? So all that thing had to be broken. And so we had to reach back, we had to go through banking, post office, in state governments to convince them, evangelize with them, co-create with them, and get them to do much of this effort. If you have to have 40,000 stations, 200,000 operators, 1.5 million people standing in line across the country, with only 150 people in the organization, with tech people being about the 30, 40 people, we had no other way to break all the paradigms that we knew and to rethink. And that was a good thing.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, talking about banks in India, we had this big nationalization task in the late 70s, early 80s, and then this whole computerization started in probably late 90s and early 2000s. Um, even then in 2009, I think less than 20% of India had bank accounts,
Yeah.
and there was difficulty in providing subsidies and government aid because of lack of bank accounts. Why was India so behind? Was it the far-flung areas which did not have access to banks? And how did this whole Aadhaar completely change this uh, statistic?
It is a combination of few things. India's banking digitization happened. What's called branch-based banking started in the 90s. Then towards the later part of 90s, went to core banking, which is branchless banking, and they were automating it. There was strike, and it had to go through multiple rounds of sort of people getting used to computerization. That is inevitability that was happening. But by early 2000, as the banks, also by the way, we only had nationalized banks until mid 90s. Uh, the new licenses were given, ICSCI, HDFC, all these licenses were given in mid 90s, and they would take 4 or 5 years before they start become operational. So we were already in early 2000. If you look at digitization, private banks starting to set in. That's when 9/11 happened. So 9/11 created significant tightening of the terrorism funding, money laundering, PML rules, FATF. So the tightening of the norm, global norms, and India was part of that. And so India had to adhere, central bank had to adhere to the norms and not keep it so diluted that we would have been taken, many countries would have not transferred and traded money with us because they would have said, you have no KYC norms, your banking sector is very weak. So our RBI was strong regulator, so they kept very high norms. So by the time these banks, private banks, and everybody started digitizing, and 2G networks, the Nokia effect started setting in early 2000, middle 2000, 9/11 had happened. So it was where the norms got tightened. The problem with that combination, and then again, a 2008 crash, a 2009, the
Lehman
market
Brothers.
crash.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lehman Brothers and all that crash happened. And so each of that financial crisis created further tightening. The problem with tightening was that, they would, no more people can get in because most Indians didn't have proof of documents. They didn't have formal mechanism to prove it. So that means two things happen. One, India has 700,000 villages or 650,000 plus villages, uh, 22 official languages or hundreds of languages, as you know, wide. So our diversity and scale is together. So we were diverse and at scale, 1.3 billion at that time, now 1.4 billion roughly. Uh, that at that scale, with the tight norms for the banks, what happened is doing business was unviable with the poor people. Because if you have to even painfully acquire you, doing all the paperwork, background checks, paperwork, KYC, get a bank account. Where do they get bank account? They get bank account 50 kilometers away. They would get 100 kilometers away, a branch, which nobody has incentive to go, 100 kilometers to a bank branch.
And the cost of
Second,
paperwork as well, right?
and cost of paperwork. And if they actually do all that paperwork, the ARPU, revenue per customer, continue to be very, very tiny because these are the people who would put in, $2 deposit or $1 deposit or, $5 deposit. So a few hundred rupees or maybe at best few thousand rupees. It's not viable at all. So no banks were never near villages. Cost of acquisition and cost of paperwork was very high, and the revenue per customer continued to be very, very low. It's a deadly combination. If you combine all three, it makes no sense to open bank accounts.
Right.
It's as simple as that. So even in 2009, we were at 17%, 18% bank account penetration, and we were stagnated. Capital market, we were stagnated. 22 million, 20 million, 2 crore, or 20 million or so. Uh, it's the same group of people, the top of the pyramid. who got mutual funds, who got stock market, or who got bank accounts, the same 20 million people out of 1.3 billion people. So it's a typical 2%, 3% at best doing uh, accessing banking system. And it is, and bank accounts were starting to open up, but it was very, very hard. It was almost defunct, useless bank accounts because it's too far, make any sense. So the nationalized bank would be forced to open bank account because it's a bank kind of sort of financial inclusion, go open the market. But it was very hard. It made no sense to them. But what happened post Aadhaar is brilliantly different. I think the cost of KYC, two or three things happened together. Again, serendipity, perfect timing. You can't give everything to Aadhaar alone. So one, the political intent. Accelerated post 2009, post 2014, even more with Jan Dhan program. Huge push towards everyone having banking access to financial services. So this political intent that's falling in place. Second, there were technological readiness. By 2009, smartphones arrived. The iPhone had launched, Android had launched, and 3G network was starting to kick in. So 2012, 2013, every year you can see cheaper Android phones, 3G networks coming. So technological readiness was starting to come into play. By then, we were already nearly 2 decades or 1.5 decades at least into banking, core banking digitization. Internet banking was a norm. Mobile banking was starting to come, at least for the people like us. So the technological readiness existed, political readiness existed. Third, the direct benefits, the benefits subsidy regime of India, where we were very socialistic, we were giving a lot of money to people, and there was a significant demand to provide subsidies into the bank account rather than and once Rajiv Gandhi, our earlier prime minister, said when you send 100 rupees, only 5 rupees or 8 rupees or less than 10 rupees actually reaches the poor, real intended beneficiary. We improved much since then, but nevertheless, it was expected that 30-40%, sometimes even 50% of that money that is given as subsidies to people like farming, cooking, gas subsidies, many programs, they were all actually starting to not reach the people. So 30-40% or 50% leaking to the middleman, it's not acceptable. It was a very large amount, and it was quite large. So I think roughly reached about 2.5% of the GDP in 2009. So these three were very key part of technological readiness and banking readiness of technology, including smartphones and 3G, political intent and subsidy cleanup, the impending need to give subsidy to ensure that the people do get their money, that their entitlements. And Aadhaar came up with the right time, sure, saying, perfect. So one thing we can take out of this cost is the KYC cost. So we said, by then, a regulator also had done, this is why you see Nandan keeps saying this, trend is your friend. If you can actually watch the trend coming together, you can intercept quite well. Another trend was mobile wallets were given licenses by then. So Paytm, MobiKwik, they were all starting to emerge. And they had a very interesting mechanism because they didn't need KYC. They only needed mobile number KYC. And their amounts were restricted to cap to 10,000 rupees, which is about what, $10, $20 or maybe $50. Yeah. Maybe that $100, maybe $100 limit at that time. 10,000 rupee limit. It was perfect. It was, that also allowed the regulator to be open enough to open something called a no-frill bank account. Because if wallets can be open, mobile wallets with a 10,000 rupee restriction with just mobile number, we should be able to open a similar bank account as well if need be. So they also were open enough to have that conversation. So 2012, we launched eKYC, and eKYC collapsed the cost from, literally, I think banking sector was about $10 KYC cost. Capital market was about $20 KYC cost, mutual funds and so on. Telecom was about, I think, $3-4 cost, $4-5 maybe at best cost. But with Aadhar, KYC came down to 20 cents. So, the collapsing was not $10 in banking sector to $8 or $5. $10 to 10 cents or 20 cents was just a crash, right? And it was completely cryptographically secure, biometric authentication. No device was needed. Very, very easy way to do it. So we went back to the central bank and asked them to craft the new norms for the no-frill accounts, and where ATM cards don't need to be issued or checkbook need not be issued, but open bank account with 10,000 rupee limit with Aadhaar as the only KYC at one click, paperless, and there was no paper form. And so we just created a new wave of bank account opening. And by then, direct benefits transfer. We worked with the one of the largest national subsidy program called cooking gas subsidy, because India, quite like African countries are going through today, India had already gone through from moving cooking wood-based cooking, burning during cooking.
Yeah.
Julas. And it was very, very painful because most women would be the victim of that. In terms of smoking, continuously smoking the cooking smoke, right? The wood burning smoke, and in small closed environment. So they would come up with better chulas and all that thing. But I think cooking gas completely changed that game. So they wanted to expand the cooking gas anyway as a for health reasons, for inclusion reasons, and the subsidy regime of cooking gas was had to be reimagined. So they said, instead of a pre-subsidized cooking gas cylinder in the market, which has a tendency to be diverted and sold in the open market, we would do market-priced cooking gas cylinder. But if you are an entitled person, if you get a cooking gas, if you authorize the cooking gas delivery, I would give you the subsidy, the difference between the market and subsidy in your bank account. So the market completely got opened up, saying that you can buy cooking gas anywhere, any cylinder, any distributor, anywhere, but you would get the money back. So that was a brilliant transition there as well. All this came together, and in 2014, when the new Prime Minister came, he just gave the perfect booster shot to all these things with Digital India program, Jan Dhan, which opened up 520 million accounts or something. Out of that, 60-65% is women. So women, gender parity was closed in bank account and identity, bank account and telecom. Gender parity was very, very rapidly closed. So gender gap was closed and parity was brought in. So it was perfect. I think 2014, it was no-brainer for the government to say, let's do all the subsidies. And today, India runs world's largest direct subsidy program, which a fraction of a cost of $1, we can move money directly into the people's account with unique identity attached. And it's just unbelievable, the digital rails that we laid. And the question of you asking last mile what happened is that even today it was difficult to open a bank branch, because opening a branch necessitates institution, office, proper security setup. You need to deploy officers to that village, but no officers want to go there because their children are studying and they want to be near the tier 1, tier 2 towns where the good education, good healthcare. So nobody would want to go there. So that the way we reimagined using digital, saying that what if digitally you can do banking at your doorstep, and that's when we created the open loop micro ATM network. Learning from the EMV world of cards, we created our own open loop micro ATM where people can use their fingerprint to deposit, withdraw, transfer money at their doorstep. And by then, India Post joined the gang, and India Post has the largest network.
Yeah.
So the India Postman would go with a cycle with a small device, and they would do banking. And much of the money that they would transact is anyway small money. It's a sachetized amount. It's not that they're transacting $50,000 or 50,000, 100,000 rupees. And they're transacting 500 rupees, 100 rupees, 300 rupees. So money transfer, the old money transfer, India Post money transfer program basically became a digital bank-led money transfer program. And this open loop system allowed any bank to be banked at any village without their dedicated machines. So that also allowed scale and economic viability of that happening. Today we have nearly 1 million, or maybe even more. I'm not sure. Last I checked, 18,000 bank mitras, they call it. Basically, bank friends. This mitra means friends in the. So bank mitras are going every village, including post office personnel, and they would do banking at the doorstep. So continue to be that a few 100 million transactions happen every day through this network, every day through the villages. So we say this: banks, even today, banks never went to village, but banking went to village. So we could get the verbs activated, banking activated through a digital open loop channel with economic. We thought about economic viability, we thought about cost, we thought about competition, we thought about all that thing and created that. So anyway, it's all working out really well for India. Today, bank account access and banking and digital payments is no more. And that's when we set ourselves up for UPI. It was perfect timing.
Yeah, that is remarkable. I mean, when you were talking about the scene in 2009, right? It just reminds me how it is. Like being poor is actually expensive. And when I say that, I mean that just because you're rich, you have easy access to things like banking, good healthcare, etc. But when you are poor, then it's actually even more expensive to get access to such things. And I'm glad that this has brought in such a remarkable transformation. And I think in
And
India,
that's a learning. I think you said very well. The lack of identity, lack of bank account access, or lack of access in general. So information asymmetry and access asymmetry comes from, and if you unbundle that, a lot of that comes from the inherent cost and the process flows. All the banking process, banking paperwork, banking, the imagination was all meant for people who can deposit money and transact money. And it never worked out for a sachetized, so the system was designed for low volume, high value environments. It was never designed for low value, high volume environments. So we had to reimagine that using digital as a means, so that physical means cost, and it would have never worked out. So it allowed us to do that.
And I think the project that you are working on currently, the ONDC, will also empower a lot of micro entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in smaller communities and increase e-commerce penetration in India. And looks like it's around 8 to 10% right now, and it's supposed to increase to what, 25% in the.
So e-commerce. So in fact, we could do this ONDC effort and the Beckn protocol, which is what the protocol that is powering the decentralized commerce we are doing. Commerce as a marketplace, as a network, not marketplace as a platform. In a platform-centric marketplace, platforms tend to accumulate power, accumulate negotiation power, accumulate pricing power, accumulate recommendations power, accumulate data-driven power, the knowledge power, who's buying what, seasonality, all that. It tend to accumulate, concentrate itself into a platform. So through Beckn protocol, we were imagining an internet-like architecture, topology of the internet, which is a network-centric topology with no central big platform accumulating all the data and the power. So we were monopolizing, decentralizing through protocol. That's when we started ONDC. But we could not have done ONDC without the UPI. Remember, UPI was the first attempt to decentralize and create an open loop payment. And we attempted that in 2014. We started writing the design and architecture with National Payment Corporation of India. And 2015, we launched it pilot. And 2016 is when production launch happened, final launch happened. And last month we did 14 billion transactions. So it's a very, it's a 450 million transactions every day. This is crazy volume. But the power of open loop was proven through UPI. Power of digital public infrastructure, UPI protocol, and the architecture is so simple that a slew of private sector innovation could come around, and they would go stick QR codes into a coconut vendor roadside. And so Google Pay, Phone Pays of the world, all these guys came up on top of the highway, digital highway, or the payment highway we laid. And then they would play to the rules of the game to actually expand the market. So by UPI success allowed us to go back and articulate to the board policymakers that, by the way, what UPI did to payments, we could do to commerce. And by then we had already started Beckn protocol effort as a foundation and open source effort. It's on GitHub, it's open source. We have 40 plus projects around the world, thousands of community members around the world. But in India, our heart was in India. So our playground was in India. And we use Beckn protocol to now start post-COVID. We started conversation around what's called ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce, which is a not-for-profit entity that is facilitating the decentralized network of the commerce, variety of commerce, food ordering, mobility, taxi booking, today regular grocery and other commerce, and of course soon agri-commerce and finance is coming. We have lending and insurance buying on ONDC happening. And the power of that multi-sectoral and open network is that they can also be programmable and combined. So a startup can now combine a delivery plan with an insurance product and so on. So combinatorial power is going to now start showing up. We are still early. ONDC is still early. It's like 2017 of UPI. It is 9 million transactions or so, maybe a 10 million transaction around that per month. It's still early and much to grow. But as you said, when you create a decentralized network as a marketplace as a network topology and not a platform concentrated topology, suddenly you have a lot more agency and choice and freedom for people who are selling something, like artisans and small micro entrepreneurs, nano entrepreneurs in India, which is what India is full of, to get a direct to customer access. This all farmer produce, for example, farmer produce organization can now go to direct to consumer and sell from the farm to the home, farm to home kind of these imaginations are now possible without one concentrated big platform centric approach. We can have many platforms. In the network topology, platforms are not going away. Platforms become nodes of the network, but no single platform will monopolize and concentrate the power. That's the idea of this internet-like thinking. And we are now doing that for beyond commerce, beyond agriculture, beyond hospitality soon, into we have an energy Beckn-based open loop energy trading transaction, interoperable EV charging, energy trades, microgrids, or what's called a virtual power plants, VPPs as they're known as in the energy sector. All those experiments are happening because all open source, open innovation. And when you give a new playground, entrepreneurs seem to rise up and reimagine the possibilities, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I think what you're doing with ONDC, like you said, is quite remarkable, because I think what you're setting out to do is building the freeway system, like how it happened in the US. It propelled economic growth, it propelled movement, it made movement faster, or like the high-speed railway in Japan, it shortened the distance between cities. and so many businesses started to come up. Um, uh, and I think the way you explained platform versus forget the other word,
Network.
network, yeah, is also quite remarkable, because if it is a platform, then it becomes monopolized. Like, for example, we have a company in the US called Etsy. It is it connects artisans to the consumer. Then what happens is, beyond a point, they become incumbents, and they start to charge heavier and heavier fees with the art for to the artisans. And we have seen that in almost all of the e-commerce platforms, and it becomes extremely difficult for marketplace vendors to compete, and they are sometimes priced out. They are sometimes, the main company starts to copy them, and
Alternate
so on.
products. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this whole democratization would mean that there are no gatekeepers, and this is probably one of the better ways to trickle down, or I think this is one of the better ways to implement quote unquote socialism in a positive way as well.
I think we are huge frankly, Beckn protocol, we are believers of capitalism, because so I just want to make sure we don't get that wrong. Um,
No, in
capitalism
the
and
in the way that,
capitalism and entrepreneurship is what is driving sustainable innovation.
yeah.
But when there is extreme concentration of power with one or two companies, obviously they become, instead of empowering in nature, they all start as empowering in nature, but they become extracting in nature.
Yeah.
And if they don't do, great, good for them. But you hear this with all the Ubers of the world, Airbnbs of the world, Ticketmasters of the world, and
Oh.
you keep hearing these stories again and again. So um, platforms, or we must have platforms, we must have entrepreneurial element, we must have capitalistic mindset, no question about it. We need to think about profit, we need to think about innovation, we need to think about competition, aggressive competition. So but the idea was that if you want to do something at human scale, we have never seen one platform doing anything. If you look at telecom network, it's a network, it's never a platform. Internet is never a platform, it's a network. So if you really look at human scale, 8 billion people scale, if you need to reimagine how digital economy could come together, we are saying it's not one platform driving the digital economy for the world. Many platforms. We are not replacing platforms. We need many platforms replacing. But if they all interconnect themselves like the telecom network or the internet, then the power of platforms get exponentially amplified. Suddenly you can have a platform in Kenya can trade with a platform in India. Maybe a platform in Kenya whose consumer app in Kenya can offer buy something from, or a hospital doctor access from India through another entrepreneur here. So interoperability of platforms is what we are driving. When we drive interoperability of platforms, each platform doing exceptionally well capitalist game, innovation game they play together, we get a human scale network, and that human scale network can uplift the entire economy, digital economy, from a purely one platform concentrated approach that we tend to do. So we must think about uh, a very interesting way to play competitive capitalism. Let me put it that way. We want to be able to create a competitive level playing field for many entrepreneurs to play through, so that this monopolistic capitalism doesn't emerge, or even if it emerges, it's muted. At least you have choices playing
Right.
out.
Right.
But otherwise, we want competitive capitalism
Yeah.
to play out, and an interoperability for human scale, so that trade and commerce and human capital movement, services movement, hospital, healthcare services movement can happen, money flow can happen. And that's what we need to reimagine the next 10, 20, 30 years. Otherwise, it's nothing. We can never be, in a very siloed walled garden mode.
Right. Yeah.
So I
I mean,
think
yeah.
it's a bold imagination, as bold as internet.
Yeah, yeah. And when I use the word socialism, probably not the right word to use in this context, but I what I meant was distribution of wealth and not having this whole monopolistic behavior
Yeah,
among.
if you create competition and choice,
Right.
generally we are good.
Right. Uh, on that note, I want to ask maybe a slightly controversial question. What are your thoughts about, one company controlling AI versus having an open source AI sub?
I think again, this is the beauty of competition. Beauty of competition is that um, we are seeing aggressively uh, both private companies competing, non-open source competition falling in play to AI, as well as open source competition playing in with Llama coming in, Mistral coming in now. The China just launched their open source edition as well. Very, very powerful models are going to emerge both in the open source and in the private space. And AI is while the consumer UX might get concentrated, and it was concentrated with Google. Google search today continue to own 98 or some percentage, ridiculously high, 90 and 90% of search. What was there, and then nobody else could really dethrone them, right? So for a consumer point of view, because acquiring consumers and expanding their market is a hard game. So it's very high chance that you will see a consumer chat GPT interface or search interface, the new generation discovery interface, uh, one or two companies at best trying to dominate it. But AI is not limited to that. AI is going to be everywhere. AI is a way of thinking, it's a way of doing, it's a way of achieving higher efficiency, higher accuracy, higher productivity, and so on. So I think if you imagine AI as the next avatar of um, algorithmic uplifting of many, many systems. It'll be in healthcare, education, agriculture, commerce, in our businesses, in HR systems, in recruitment systems. Today recruitment might be all paper-based. Now it'll be a lot more. AI will sift through this resumes and resumes, look at a lot more smarter decision, faster, smarter, high productive environments, right? So, but that will never be monopolized. And I'm sure that that's the beauty of capitalism, it's the beauty of competition, is that the influx of money there would allow us to create enough choices there, and we must create enough choices. And there might be some areas where we might want to induce efforts to democratize AI as well, which is what India has done with language program. India's language mission called Bhashni was to democratize speech and text to speech and so on, the voice recognition, speech, text to speech, OCR, in all Indian languages, and in EkStep Foundation, where I'm the CTO. We actually, with AI for Bharat, funded that effort even before ChatGPT was launched. We started that effort with them, knowing that Indic language is going to be a very key part of a billion people interacting with the computer beyond the entertainment. They do entertainment today, but if they have to transactionally interact through the computer, voice is going to be powerful. Indic language is going to be powerful. And we were democratizing that. We have a national mission called Bhashini that is evangelizing that today to create Indic voice and language-based interfaces for the next 500, 600 million people to participate in transactional economy, not entertainment economy, transactional economy. They should be able to participate. So sometimes we can induce some things. Sometimes you just have to let the market compete itself and play through. But we should never be monopolized with AI. Cannot be. It's too dangerous. So we need to see both competition, private competition, and open source efforts. And I'm very confident. I'm very
Yeah, I mean,
confident. You probably see.
similar thing happened with mobile OS and also just operating systems in the computer as well. So yeah, that seems like a fair fair way to go. Pramod, before we end this podcast, I have one final question. I know you touched upon this very briefly about how DPI can address things like climate change and sustainability challenges. Uh, uh, can you maybe double down on some specific examples how open networks can enhance the use of sustainable energy or maybe even enhance circular economy?
Yeah, so again, I think it'll be quite silly of me to make a tall claim that we can address climate change through some tech. You know, sure, technology always been a tool, and we'll continue to create both deep technology to deal with removal of plastic from sea, extracting carbon from air, or decentralized high caliber energy production. So the deep, what's called a deep tech. Deep tech will continue to play through to help out this. But there is an alternate way also saying that if you look at any resilient net, what you call, or sustainable network, it needs to create dramatically reduce coordination cost and dramatically increase trust. So if you don't increase trust and improve significantly improve coordination, humans cannot solve at scale anything without coordination and trust. But what we believe is that if you look at recycle economy, circular economy, you would see the margins are so thin and the efforts are high. So it gets very hard. So if you have a furniture in your house, or you would look at how do you dispose it, it's very hard to discover. You go to Facebook Marketplace or something, try to figure it out. So much of that unbundles itself to realization that if you had a better way to coordinate, discover, transact in a trustworthy fashion, coordinate, discover, and transact in a trustworthy fashion among much larger network, you can bring extreme efficiency in the system. And technology is a great leveler for creating digital trust, digital coordination, digital discovery, and digital transactability among humans. And if we get, so we believe protocols like, protocols, as we call protocols, HTTP equivalent protocols, create a network-centric ability to coordinate among the network participants. Participants among a large network can coordinate, discover, transact, trust each other, and contract and fulfill each other. If we can get that done, we can dramatically reduce the coordination cost of trust and efficiency in that transaction. When you reduce the cost, then suddenly a lot more value chain starts become viable, like a circular economy. And that's the real. And when you look at, for example, a disaster in a town, much of the cost that you incur is coordination cost. When you end up having in a camp, when a flood hits Kerala, for example, you end up having camps. Good Samaritans jump in. Good Samaritans jump in to help. Massive campaigns happen, Facebook, WhatsApp campaign. But you end up having more food in one camp, less food in other camp, more clothes in another camp, because it all comes down to efficient coordination. So if you can create a digital fabric that allows efficient coordination, high trust, low cost transactability and coordination among people and entities, it can dramatically improve climate resilience, circular economy, of course, large scale energy transition that is going through creating that interoperable fabric at the bottom. So we are very, very, very clear that if we want human scale transition to happen and efficient coordination to happen, technology or technology driven fabric, interoperable fabric like internet as a fabric is very, very key. And that's what we are after. But that is, I want to leave it with the thought that it is a necessary condition, but not sufficient to solve anything at scale, okay? But it is necessary to do it for human scale interventions, but it's not at all sufficient. So we need to be humble. technology can only do so much, but it is a necessary thing to do. So that's what we focus on. If we can do that, it creates much better hope for us and much better choices for it, much better optionality for us in the future.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Technology may not be the answer to everything, but it can definitely move the needle, even if it's a little bit. But thank you so much, Pramod, for your time, and I wish you all the very best with your efforts with ONDC, FIDE, and also EkStep Foundation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and pleasure talking to you as well. Take
Thank
care.
you.